Hi, this is Allison Villars. We're back with In the Loop, and I'm Health and Human Services Director for St. Tammany Parish. And today we have with us Sherry Eastridge. She is with Safe Harbor. And Sherry's going to tell you all about Safe Harbor, but first we're going to find out about her. So Sherry, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here today.
Okay, so tell me, where did you come from? You're not originally from here, is that right?
That's correct. I'm a come here. I've been here for about 5 years now. I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee before I came here.
Is that where you grew up?
Yes, it is. I grew up in the foothills of the Smokies. It was an incredibly beautiful place to grow up. I missed the fall terribly, but we're very fond of our home here in Louisiana. We came for my husband's work years ago.
Okay, and so were you working with domestic violence in Knoxville before you came?
I was. I was a program director of a large domestic violence program in Knoxville, and I'd been there for about 5 years when we left.
And what attracted you to the work?
Well, when I finished my bachelor's degree in psychology, I wanted to work with at-risk children. So I worked in a group home for children in state custody for behavioral health disorders. I was working with children with oppositional defiant disorder, reactive attachment disorder. And after about a year of working with those children and then seeing how oftentimes in the system they're returned to not so functional homes, I thought that I could do more work with parents and adults, and there was an opening at our local domestic violence program to manage a transitional housing program. And so I got started in domestic violence work.
Well, it's really great that you're devoting your life to take care of people who are caught in situations that sometimes they feel they don't have any control over, and in many cases they don't until they can take action. So talk to me about what kinds of things people consider domestic violence these days. And I know that people out there who are listening to us may be people experiencing situations that are violent, whether it be emotional or physical, or a combination, and maybe other things that I'm not aware of at this point. So let's make sure that we're talking to them or their family members or people who can get in place to help them.
Certainly.
Okay.
So when we talk about domestic violence, we're not talking about a single incidence of violence where oftentimes tempers flare and maybe it's just a bad night in the home. We're talking about ongoing patterns of multiple forms of abusive behavior that one partner uses to exert power and control over the other partner's life. And those forms of abuse can include physical violence. That's what most of us are comfortable with and understand as a form of abuse. But there are other forms as well. There's verbal abuse, which is the minimizing, the insults, the criticisms that a partner uses against their victim to tear them down. There's economic abuse, which is actually a huge problem for domestic violence survivors. Recent research is indicating that more domestic violence victims experience economic abuse than those that experience physical abuse. And these are situations where an abusive partner may sabotage someone on the job or harass them on the job. They may get them fired. They may refuse to let them work. They may withhold financial resources from them. It's a very effective tool for keeping a victim with an abusive partner. Sexual abuse is also a form of domestic violence that happens inside intimate relationships. In fact, most sexual abuse takes place in the context of relationships, not strangers. And we like to think of, when we talk about domestic violence, that the physical violence is a threat that always exists. It's not like you see in the movies sometimes where it's physical violence every day, all day. But when you're experiencing that, you only have to be hit one time to know that you're going to be hit anytime that partner wants to do that. And so the threat of it is always there, holding the rest of those abusive behaviors together.
So let me ask you a question. I think this is maybe a frequently asked question, or maybe I've been watching too much on TV or movies and things like that. But
You can't get away from it. It's in everything.
I know. So a partner frequently in an abusive situation does the abuse, whatever form it takes, and then apologizes for it. So can you talk to people out there who might be potential victims or neighbors witnessing this, going on, or even police officers or, family members who know that this apology is coming or has come? Right. What do you say to people who are experiencing the abuse and then an apology?
So we talk about domestic violence as a cycle very commonly. It can be a little misrepresentative of some folks' experience. Not everyone is receiving that what we call the honeymoon period, where everything is wine and roses again, and apologies and gifts and treating someone well. Not everyone experiences that, but a lot of people do. And clearly, that's the time when an abusive partner needs to convince that victim to stay with them. We're not cave people anymore. We don't club someone over the head and drag them back to the house and keep them there by force. So we need to keep them there through a manner of the gifts and the apologies and getting them to believe that things will be better again. Most of these relationships don't begin with abuse. They begin with lots of charisma. This is like usually the most romantic person you've ever met. Everything seems like it was just destined to be. There's a really quick push for involvement. And as soon as there's a dependence established, as soon as the victim has moved in with or maybe gotten married to or gotten pregnant with a child, then slowly more and more abusive behavior gets introduced into the relationship. So I like to sort of compare it to like the bully on the playground. If I'm the bully on the playground and I'm taking all your marbles, what happens when I've taken everybody's marbles? The game is over, right? So I have to give you some marbles back. And I might give you some marbles back and little Tommy some marbles back. I won't give them back to everybody, but I can't keep the game going if I just take all the marbles and I just now have all the marbles. And abusers do the same thing. They can't continue to abuse if they don't have you also believing that they love you, they want to be with you, and things are going to be great and wonderful.
And some of them believe that, or maybe most of them believe that.
Well, most of us would want to believe that.
Yeah.
Most of us want to believe that the person that we've partnered with, that we've had children with, that we've married, that we're trying to build a life with, that when they say they love us, they mean it. We want to believe that.
So the person who's actually saying it, do they believe it?
That would not be within my wheelhouse of expertise
Okay.
to answer, Miss Allison.
Okay, well, so let's talk about specific kinds of things. Somebody calls into a number. What I'm guessing that's the first entree they might have to Safe Harbor here in our
Correct.
community. So they're going to make a phone call. What number would they call?
Well, they would call our 24/7 hotline. That number is 985-626-5740.
Okay, say it one more time.
5740.
Okay.
And there's also a toll-free version of that number. It's the statewide hotline. It's 888-411-1333.
Okay, and we're going to put that on the screen so people can
Yes.
see it. So I want to know who they're going to wind up talking to when they call.
So when you call our hotline, you'll be talking to a specially trained advocate who has had over 40 hours of training in providing specific danger assessment and safety planning for a domestic violence victim to talk with them about their options for safety. Not all victims are ready to talk about leaving a relationship, so we can talk with them about how they can be safer if they stay in a relationship. We can also talk to those victims about leaving safely. Louisiana in 2018 is again the second highest state in the nation for the number of women who are killed by men. And leaving is the most dangerous time for a victim. So we want to talk with them about safe ways to exit that relationship, how to plan for where they're going to go, even if they're not staying with us in our shelter, how to plan for where they're going to go, what resources they're going to need, what sorts of legal protections they may want to put in place. I mean, our advocates are well experienced with talking about these issues with the survivors who call. We also frequently talk to family members or friends of people who are very concerned about their mother, their brother, their sister, or someone they know who's being harmed in a relationship. And we'll talk with those folks about how they can be most helpful to their family member or their friend.
And they call the same numbers?
They call the same number.
Okay. So when somebody calls and talks to this person, they're going to sort of be where that person is. If they don't want to move yet, if they're not ready to take action, specific action yet,
Correct.
They can still have somebody to talk to about what they're going through. And frequently, I think they might not even know it's abuse. They just have a situation that they are dealing with, and they want to know how to better deal with it. So you said danger assessment, and I think then you said safety plan.
Correct.
So can you tell me what a danger assessment is and what a safety plan is?
Yes.
Okay.
So many different forms of danger assessment are used throughout the domestic violence field. What we use specifically is called the Campbell Danger Assessment Tool. We are specifically trained to utilize that tool. And it is evidence-based and looks at what we have determined. Domestic violence has actually been researched academically for going on 5 decades now, and we have a large body of information that helps to inform our work. So this tool was developed by Dr. Jackie Campbell and looking at known risk factors for domestic violence homicides. So we're able to get a better idea of someone's risk of being killed and to talk with them in very direct terms about what those risks are and what those risks mean for them. And then we use that information along with the survivor to talk about ways in which they can be safer, which is what we call safety planning. It's not just a piece of paper to fill out or check boxes on. It's a process that we go through with an individual, whether they're staying in our shelter or coming in for services, or we're just talking to them on the phone about decisions they can make, resources they can put into place, ways that they can ensure their safety, just certain actions and steps that they can take that will increase their risk of being, particularly to be able to exit a relationship safely, because we know that about 75% of the victims who are killed in domestic violence homicides are killed while they attempt to flee or shortly thereafter.
Okay, so when this person, it would be potentially, a partner could be a female or a male, correct?
Correct.
And so are there any differences in terms of dealing with the genders when the partner who's being abused is a male?
No, honestly, there isn't.
Okay.
Their abusers tend to behave in very similar ways. That's how we're able to know so much about forms of abuse and cycles of abuse and risk factors that are related to lethality, because abusers behave in such similar ways regardless of their gender. What is usually the barrier for someone who is not a woman being abused by a man are more societal factors. So, men often experience stigma. They may be in a same-sex relationship and being abused by their partner, and so they face additional challenges of being concerned for those types of barriers.
Okay.
And there are different safety considerations in a same-sex relationship versus a heterosexual relationship.
So you would talk to men on the phone as well?
We would, and we do.
Okay.
Every day.
Do you also have a shelter for men, or it's just for women?
We shelter men in exactly the same manner that we do women. We're required to by law.
Okay.
In fact, the Violence Against Women Act established a lot of the funding that flows through domestic violence programs. It originally passed in 1994. It's up for reauthorization here in 2018,
Right.
it has always required us to provide services to any victim, regardless of their status as for their gender, their familial status, their sexual orientation. None of that is relevant
Okay.
to us. We provide services in exactly the same manner.
Okay, well, I want to okay, so the phone call, I'm speeding this up. So months maybe go by after a phone call, or right then, the person says, I really need out, and I hear the safety plan, and these are the things I'm taking in consideration, but I need shelter. Can you help me? What do you do?
Well, there are a variety of ways in which we bring someone into shelter, assuming that we have space. You know, every year we have to assist about 400 or 500 folks with children to find shelter in other ways because our shelters reached capacity and they are still calling and needing that resource. But when we do bring someone in, sometimes they have their own transportation and we bring them in their own vehicles. Sometimes we send a taxi after them. Sometimes we meet that person somewhere. It depends on what's safest for their situation and what resources they have at their own disposal. Sometimes a family member may bring them in. There's a variety of ways.
Well, let's assume that you have space in your shelter. What would that space be for a person with a child?
So our shelter is actually two-bedroom homes. And it's not like a lot of people think that it's like what you see on TV, where it's this big room filled with rows of cots and bunk beds. And that's not really the case. We run a shelter that operates as closely to someone's home as possible. So it is communal living. They share living rooms, bathrooms, kitchens. We try to minimize it to one family per bedroom. We have to follow the fire marshal's rules about how many people we can put in there, of course. But you walk in, you have a living room of your own, you have a kitchen of your own to use, sharing with other survivors,
Right.
of course. You have a bed to sleep in. We always keep one family to a bedroom, so your children are there with you, and we are there on site to provide services 24/7.
I think the 24/7 is really important for people to know about, that there's somebody there that they can talk to, because I'm guessing they're very stressed and emotional about the decision they made to go someplace else. So when you don't get to shelter them, and I know you wish you had space for all of them, but when you don't get to shelter them, where else might you help them get placed?
Well, we're fortunate here in Southeast Louisiana that there are several other domestic violence programs serving nearby. And so we can often call them to see if they have space and help the person to get there if they want to go. Sometimes we partner with local homeless service providers and help the person to participate in those programs. In the worst case scenario of someone who's in a really dangerous situation and needs out, we may even put them in a hotel room for a night or two until we can help them to figure out what their next step is. You would probably be surprised at the number of people who contact us and they have a family member somewhere else. You know, they have a mom in South Carolina or a cousin in California who, if they could just get there, that person would help them. And so we utilize a lot of our community partners to help get that person on a bus, on a flight, whatever it may be, and help them get to a family member that's safe for them, where they may have a chance to start over. So there are many options whenever our shelter's full, ways that we can help someone.
I can imagine being in a situation and not, you talked about the economics of it, you know, not having any money. And so I'm calling you and you're going to shelter me or help me get to my cousin in California, but I don't have any money.
Right.
So what do you say to that person? You know, I can't come, I don't have any money to get there.
Right.
What do you say?
Well, we will, even if we have to bear the whole brunt of the cost, we have some great communities partners that always help us out with that. But we'll buy at the minimum a bus ticket to get someone to a safe place, and we always make sure that person has plenty of food and snacks for the road, or cash donations from some of our faith-based partners so they can purchase food along the way. I think that in part makes our services so different from just homeless services, in that we're making sure that that person has every resource they're going to need until they can be in a safe place. You know, and when they stay at the shelter, our shelter's free. We don't charge for any of our services, and it's not income based. So you don't have to be in a certain income bracket to qualify for our services.
I'm glad you said that because it's one of my questions. So domestic violence, socioeconomically, is what?
It's ubiquitous. Domestic violence is everywhere. It knows no social boundaries. It happens in every racial and ethnic group. It happens in every socioeconomic group. It happens on this side of the parish and that side of the parish. It is in every neighborhood, every educational background. It exists all over, unfortunately. You know, our current statistics from the CDC are 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men. So anywhere where we could cluster 4 women together, one of them is likely to be a domestic violence.
So 25%.
25% and 11% of men.
Okay, so I have another question. So I'm a person, I called, I went to the shelter, and you were really gracious and you helped me out, but I went back. So I call again and I need shelter. What do you do?
We bring you right in as long as we have space.
Okay.
For us, we know that, you know, the average survivor is going to leave a relationship 7 to 12 times before they may be able to stay out of it. And that's for multiple reasons. When faced with who's going to watch the kids, who's going to help raise the kids, what if I'm expecting my children to grow up without their father? And the tactics that abusive partners use, the apologies, the promises to get help. You know, I'll go to church, I'll go to counseling, I'll go to alcohol treatment. All of us would want to believe those things and want our family to be whole. So we know that there are times when survivors want to and need to return to relationships. And we want for every person who's ever received services from us to know that they can come back anytime, that our doors are always open and we're not judging them for those decisions. It's part of the process. Leaving is a process. Every time a survivor leaves and works with us, they are gathering tools for their toolbox. They are learning about resources that may help them in the future. And someday they'll get that toolbox all together, and we never know the impact that we're going to have on someone. So we would rather folks know that they're welcome to come back to services than to make people feel like we're going to hold their decisions against them.
So it's nice that you guys are not judging them. I think it's extremely important because I think society has something in it that sort of judges. I hear the question a lot, why did she go back?
Right.
Like, well, you know, I don't understand. So can you talk to that person in society who might be articulating that and help them understand?
Sure. So, you know, a lot of our public education piece, our community awareness campaigns, we talk about why victims don't leave and why victims go back. And there are so many factors associated with it. You know, the economic factors are some of the most powerful. When you have a handful of small children and maybe not an education yourself that enables you to earn higher than minimum wage, there's a lot of concern for how are you going to take care of these children. Everyone comes, is raised in a home with different religious values, family values. Many people believe that it's wrong to split up your family. And so they have the pressure of those feelings and thoughts, as well as I've been saying, just that ingrained belief that we want to have that the person who says they love us really does and does want to treat us well and be good to us. So they want to return to experience that. Again, many times when we're working with survivors and we point out that cycle, they're able to see, yeah, you know, you're right, that's how it's been. I go back, it's great, and then before too long, it's awful again. But for many, they're not there yet. They haven't seen enough of that cycle themselves to be ready to try to cut that off. Right.
So there are people who have been in your shelter or been counseled on the phone or you know, visited with you and gotten a lot of great information and very helpful information for them. And just assume that person is working and the violence threatens them in their workplace. Do you have any ideas about what to tell employers to do when that happens?
Oh, I have a host of ideas.
Okay, I'm certain you did.
In fact, we have a whole training that we're presenting to the North Shore Human Resources in SHRM next month that we've developed because we've had so many requests for this information. There's a lot of good information out there on policy development. The short version would be we start by believing. We start by believing what people are telling us is happening to them. But developing internal policies to deal with how do you handle an employee who has a protective order? How would you handle an employee whose abuse is taking place on site at your place of employment? It's a long conversation to have, but there are a lot of great guides for how to develop policies around that. And that's driven by the fact that a lot of incidences of domestic violence do occur on the work site. I think all of us could probably remember the San Bernardino shooting that happened a couple of years ago. That was an estranged husband who shot his wife and incidentally a child at a school. About 33% of women who are killed on a work site, it's due to a domestic situation. So there's good reason for us to have some guidelines on
So if
policy
an
development.
employer needed that, I know you're going to be speaking at the Society of Human Resources Management, the SHRM meeting, but how do they get that information from you?
They can call. They can call the same hotline number and request to speak to someone about a training or a presentation.
Right.
That's something we have ongoing all year long is our public awareness campaigns. And those trainings are free, and it's a valuable resource to the community, we think.
I think it's a great resource to the community. So do you have some of those policies on your website?
No, we actually just redid our website,
Okay.
giving new birth to our agency this year. We've had a whole branding experience with a new logo and a new website, and so some of that content is being worked on right now.
Right.
But we are in the process of preparing some written materials that, of course, then will be available through the website.
And what is your website?
It is www.safeharbornorthshore.org.
Okay. And is there any other phone number that they can use? Just the two numbers you gave at the beginning, the phone numbers?
Our office number is 985-626-5710, but it kind of all rings into the same place. So really just call any of the numbers that you've been given, and you can ask to speak to someone about a presentation or a training, and they'll get you to me.
Okay. Well, Sherry, this has been great. I haven't asked you all the questions that are possible in regard to this, but is there anything really important you want to leave anyone who's being abused with? An idea, a thought?
Yes. I would tell you that you're not alone. One of the most important things that an abuser does to convince you that there is no help for you is to make you feel like this is normal and that you're isolated and no one will help you. And that's simply not true. You're not alone. There are resources, there are people, there are others you can talk to who've gone through similar things, and there are professionals who can help you figure out what you need to do to take back your life. And we would be honored to do that for you.
And Sherry Eastridge is at Safe Harbor, and I want to thank you very much for your time today. And I hope that you will see other episodes of In the Loop. It's to keep you informed about what's going on in St. Tammany Parish. And I, again, am Allison Villars. Thank you for joining us.